This may be the most rite of passage thing that I ever do. Notoriously, one of the most challenging tasks in a kitchen is making croissants. It just happens to be a process that has a slew of very important and precise steps, and small mistakes in any of them can completely ruin your final product. So with that said, of course, I was not going to develop my own recipe and process for this. I'll never be that good anyway, so I followed a recipe of one of the goats in baking, and that's Claire Saffitz. She has a super explanatory process on YouTube as well as in written form, which I'm going to link below, of course. I watched this thing like 20 times in preparation for this video, so without detailing the ingredient amounts or too much of the recipe process, I'm going to talk you through how it worked for me. Mixing the détrempe was straightforward and simple like any other enriched bread that I've made, just mixing ingredients in my stand mixer and finishing with some butter to enrich it. She does this really cool crosshatch cut on her dough with a really sharp knife, and I tried to do the same because I had just sharpened my knife and it didn't work. I'm just not good at this, so I grabbed a razor blade and tried to fix it, but I think it was too far gone. Failure. Either way, after its initial rise, I tossed it into the fridge to fully cool down. In the meantime comes making the butter block. Kind of a cool process. You just flatten out some Kerrygold butter in some wrapped up parchment paper. Again, pretty straightforward and well explained. I think my butter block came out pretty well. That chills in the fridge along with the dough, and then you pull all that out. So now you just roll this long enough to be able to fit the butter block inside and fold it in. I still think it was so far so good here. I was just pinching the edges to really enclose the butter block. And this is where we start to laminate to try to get some layers out of this. It was going decently and I was just trying to keep everything even. The cold dough and butter make it kind of hard to roll, and it took me a few minutes every time to do this. And I was definitely getting some uneven edges on both sides, but that's kind of natural when you're rolling something out. What I missed was that Claire in her video cut the uneven edges off, but she didn't really say it in the video, so I wasn't paying attention. It is written in the recipe too, so I should have known better, but I didn't think I could do that. So my book fold was pretty ugly compared to hers, but I pressed on and folded it again and tried to flatten it a bit so it was easier to freeze and refrigerate. Also, this is where I realized that I could have trimmed off the uneven edges, and I tried to correct it after the fact, which wasn't a good idea. But this is definitely where I thought I was going to ruin the recipe, and it was getting pretty late. But it was too late to turn back, so I just froze it and then refrigerated it again. And no, that's not a mistake I accidentally left in there. I intentionally did because I said that phrase like 50 times and I just couldn't get it. Yeah, to me what makes this process so difficult and kind of frustrating at times is not that it's a 24-hour or so recipe, because I'm fine with those, but it's the spread out time between steps. You can't just kind of set this and forget it. There's always like an hour to an hour and a half gap between each step, so you don't really have downtime to get into anything else, and you're just kind of sitting there waiting for the next part, which is to take this dough out and roll it really long and thin once again. Definitely harder to roll this time around because of all the butter layers and because mine was kind of inconsistent and not even everywhere. And I took a while to roll everything out each time, so I think my butter melted more than it should have, which allowed it to pull around the edges that I was pushing it into and just made that uneven as well on the inside. Also, my butter started to squeeze out of the edges that kind of punctured themselves open. Again, I really just thought I ruined everything here, so I just added some flour to try to patch it up, but I was getting pretty nervous. I did eventually get it long enough to be able to fold it into thirds like a letter here. I made sure to trim the uneven edges this time because I missed that the last time. My letter looks nowhere near perfect or like Claire's, but it's a lot better than it was the first time around. So basically another hour and a half of resting in the freezer in the fridge, and then the final roll to get this prepped for tomorrow when we're going to cut this and bake it. Just trying to get it into a slightly rectangular shape, but really thin and wide and long. I had a lot of trouble doing this. It was fighting back pretty hard. And I noticed that my dough seams were not on the sides like they were supposed to be. They were kind of drifting onto the top and bottom of the dough. Lots of butter leaks on top and bottom, and I was just trying to patch them as I went. But it was almost midnight at this point, so I was just ready to get this into the fridge and me in bed. So I got this slab wrapped in plastic wrap. It looked satisfactory at this point. Squeezed that into my fridge, and then I finally got to bed. Day one took me like 10-ish hours, which was more than I thought, but oh well. The next day started with me getting some simmering water into the bottom of the oven so it could create steam. That's how you proof your croissants. So I pulled the dough out of the fridge and then re-rolled it back out to that shape that I had last night. It kind of shrunk a bit by a few inches on both sides. It seemed better today after getting to rest overnight, but it still didn't look perfect at all. So here it was just time to trim off the uneven edges, which I couldn't do all the way because the unevenness went all the way towards the middle of my dough. Oh well, I just cut it into 4 even rectangles, and then I cut each of those into 2 strips to make triangles. Tried to stretch those a bit and then even them out kind of like she does in her video. Then I carefully rolled those up, and at this point I was really excited because these looked like croissants. You could see all the butter layers and the ridges on the sides, and even though my dough wasn't smooth like hers, it still looked really pretty. Just laid each of those onto some parchment paper on a baking sheet and then into the oven to proof for a couple of hours. Perfect time for me to run to judo and back. I pulled mine out at a little over 2 hours of proofing. I think I should have left them in a bit longer to puff up more, but they looked okay. After they rest in the fridge and the oven is preheated, I just finished with some egg wash on top. Took a while to do this as well because you have to be careful not to get the butter on the ridges on the sides of the croissant and just get it on top. So I was once again worried about the butter becoming too soft, but then I threw them into my oven and rotated the trays halfway through, and I was honestly shocked that my butter wasn't pouring out and melting all over the place. A little of it was pooling underneath, but not nearly as much as I thought. All positive signs, and they were browning up really nicely. So I pulled them out a little less time than what Claire said to do because they looked brown enough on top and they were starting to burn on the bottom. And wow, these came out halfway decent looking after all the mess that I made the day before and the morning of. I mean, this looks like what you'd get at a local bakery. It's impossible to tell what's on the inside, but the outside looks the part. Definitely smells amazing and has a crispy and flaky outer shell. To this point, I honestly did way better than I thought I would, which, to be fair, I always have low expectations for myself, but still. But can't know for sure how everything came out until I get to a taste test, so let's jump right in. So one way or another, we have arrived here, and even with all the issues and mistakes that I went through, I still think I have a pretty decent final product. I didn't think it was going to come out this well. I haven't tasted it yet, but it looks decent, it looks the part. I don't think I've made anything else that requires so much attention and has so many strict rules. Macarons come to mind, but this was definitely harder. I don't know what they have going on over there in France, but it's good. But first, let's go ahead and get a closer look at this as we cut into it. Okay, I have to say, not bad. You have the cross section that I think you're supposed to have. Maybe it didn't puff up as much as some that I see in bakeries, but it still has the air pockets and the flaky layers. I think it's time to try it. Bon appetit. It does have the flaky layers that you're looking for. It's a little bit dense, I'd say, but not extreme by any means. This is what I would expect coming out of a bakery. Maybe they could have been baked a couple minutes longer to get the inside a little more tender, but this bottom was starting to burn and the outside was plenty brown, so I think this is a good happy medium. It wouldn't be a party without our friend the bear. That's good. So I'm certainly proud of how these came out, especially for our first try. Can't take full credit obviously because this is not my recipe, but even a perfect croissant recipe is easily ruined by whoever's making it. Kerrygold is also the best. Is this worth all the work? And that's for you to decide. I don't know if I'll do this again, at least not for a long time. But to me, it's not like a life-changing food or meal. It tastes really good, but at the end of the day, it is just dough. No knock though, because this is a masterpiece. So this is in preparation for me to visit France, which if I time this right, I'm gonna be there as you're watching this video. Stay tuned for next week's video, hopefully as well, another French classic. But yeah, definitely a fun experiment, something to do, just something to challenge yourself with if you like being in the kitchen, you like baking, you like cooking. I highly recommend doing this at least once. That's it for me today. Thank you guys for watching, be blessed, and I'll see you next time. I just really want to know who stumbled upon this entire process. I just want to talk.